All right. So with that, let's go ahead and begin. I think I'm gonna keep the Twitch volume very low because it's just them commentating.
I would say prefer this map compared to Starburst if you're going to compare these two teams. They'd probably be happier about the fact it's a neutral map pick, but no, neither of them picked it. Splat Zones, Makamar, the first.
Okay, so we have a Tri-Slosher, Firefin, Splatterscope versus with Custom, Dually Swelcher Junior versus CDS, Tri-Slosher Junior, and the Nautilus. Why did I blank so hard? So if we were to look at these team comps, both teams are running double armor, Inkstorm, and then the custom Nautilus, I think, is the Inkjet one versus a Bomb Rush. And then it's Zone Makamart. So the Bomb Rush is actually really good here. Bomb Rush is really good for the small point. And then you can also safely from the little street here, you can throw the bombs even across the pillow that's in the middle that the play button is blocking. Both teams favoring double armor, which isn't really surprising. The closer you get to the highest point in this game, double armor just is everywhere. The Inkstorm is a bit interesting. They might be using it, both teams might be favoring it simply as an engage or a way to just have some form of zone presence. The Inkstorm doesn't really do a whole lot for this point. It's too big for the Inkstorm to actually really help contest it by itself. That and people can also just hide behind the pillow to paint. So, and then comp-wise, the only thing that's different is the Charger versus the Nautilus. In this case, if I were to, well, special-wise, they're basically identical. So special-wise, no team really has an advantage outright. Really boils down to the Inkjet user being good at Inkjet, but it's FTWin. I think it's probably safe to assume that the Inkjet is probably going to be useful and going to be good. So I would say, just looking at this, I would bet that Starburst probably doesn't really have an advantage in this situation, strictly because once the train went by. I think the biggest problem with Starburst comp is if they don't get first control or if they lose control, it's a lot harder for their Charger to get in a good position, especially because it's a scoped one, so it has to be more stationary than if it was an unscoped. Where the Nautilus is more flexible with how it can move around, even if it doesn't have the zone. If they lose first cap or don't get it, or they just don't have control, the Nautilus is more capable of flexing around the map than the Charger is. If they went with an unscoped Firefin, they would probably be in a better situation where they could actually maneuver around. But by using a scope, they're basically ensuring that the weapon has to be a little bit more stationary. And if they have to play stationary, then if they don't have the first cap, it's going to be a lot harder for that to have more pressure as opposed to anything that FTWin has. So I would definitely say if they get the first cap, Starburst comp is probably a little bit better, because once the Charger has positioning and can choose where they want to sit, their comp is much better for the fact that their Charger can play grounded when they have control. If they don't have control, then it makes it a lot harder for the Charger to get a good position when they have to compete against the Nautilus, which can just go anywhere on the map and exist anywhere and doesn't have to be a stationary. So basically what I'm trying to say is, if Starburst gets first cap, they're at an advantage. If FTWin gets the first cap, then Starburst has a really, really bad chance at this. So we can go ahead and start.
First game with the grand final of the Transatlantic Splatoon League. Here we are at Top 9.
Here we are indeed. You can take a look. Both sides are going to be bringing in double armor with the Tri-Slosher.
So we have Ice taking a typical spot on stack.
Already, he has had quite a day, and we were informed that earlier.
First armor is from Ant, and it looks like the counter armor was used as well, so both teams have armor. They aren't really playing aggressive. The Tri-Slosher goes down, so now FTWin gets to push with their second armor. So right here, when you can see Bran, which I think is their Tri-Slosher. He isn't anywhere near, so obviously he's allowing Ant to paint for his armor first and not really prioritizing it. Or if you look at FTWin, they've already used their armor at the same time that Ant has used his, and their Tri-Slosher is more than halfway up to his armor. So it seems as if Brand is relying on Ant to give him the armor so he can play a bit more aggressive as opposed to trying to play for a second armor. So either Ant knows that Brand is going to push up, or they call like that they're using armor, so they were close to armor, they saw they had it, so they're trying to counter armor, and Brand is trying to take advantage of this.
I wonder if VC is on for this one, Matt.
Yeah, Brand is the Tri-Slosher. And he gets... It's hard to see exactly what he loses to, but the second they lose their Tri-Slosher, that's their only real other pressure. They can't have something like the Junior isn't going to fight, the Nautilus can't, or like the CDS can't really fight as well as it used to. Basically makes it to where if Brand played a little bit slower to ensure their second armor, then when FTWin popped their second armor, it would go back to an even fight. But Brand being the only real aggressor that they have, him falling immediately, like the first death, and not even having like close to armor, basically made it to where they were basically going to lose that fight no matter what, as he's their only real aggressor on this team.
So FTWin, right? They're willing to give it up at the start so they can set up the way that they want to break.
So Starburst is using every special except their second armor, and then Brand is going to use his armor immediately. And he does get aggressive with it, which is what he should be doing. FTWin is definitely playing super aggro with their armors.
Now we're seeing something from FTWin that I've seen this all throughout Tassel, and I love it. They are so good at just moving backwards.
I don't get that move by Brand. So he throws 2 burst bombs. He thinks Keo is much weaker than he actually is. He must have thought that both those hits were directs, meaning that he could just one slosh kill him. With the positioning here, sorry, I'm jumping around a lot. With Ice being this close to zone, and like, I mean, Jared's here, but not really backing him up, or at least that's what it looks like. I would assume Ice must have started this bomb rush farther away, because this is... Okay, yeah, you can kind of see him up here. Being this close, like he was right here when he was bomb rushing, that is like a super questionable play. Granted, like, nobody on FTWin can really... Well, they can shoot him at range, but taking that sort of positioning to bomb rush is super risky, because all it takes is for the Junior or the Tri-Slosher just come out of nowhere and just immediately kill that bomb rush and make that entire wasted special.
It's a very, very even fight here, but it looks like John the Flank's able to take out enough. And it should be FTWin taking this, but Brand on the flank right now is able to find someone as well. That's going to be Biscuit going down, and armor popped. Still in this fight, 9.
So there, he popped his second armor while he already had it. And that was... Let's see here. It's hard to say from this point of view. It looks like... well... It looked like Ant was the only other person in a fight. So the second armor was definitely not something that they called for. That was definitely something that was done out of panic, it seems like. As no one else was even... other than Ant, no one was in a fight. And Ant isn't really even somebody that should be in a fight. And it definitely screams that he was panicking there.
But FTWin has been able to move people up. You saw right there. They pushed in. They took one down. They got the revenge kill, and they went back to mid. They said, "You come to us. We know you're building up 4 specials. We will wait." And goes down again.
Investing into a fight that they've already lost, and Ant realizes it and backs out. They aren't really waiting out for their specials. The thing is, like, FTWin can just use their specials, like they just use an Ink Storm and an Ink Armor just to hold their positioning, because they know that Starburst has some specials and has to use them at this point. But they're basically, Starburst isn't coordinating their specials, they're just using them. With Brand using armor while already having it, Ant using armor too late, they're investing in fights that they've already lost, or not waiting to be able to invest in a fight that they could potentially win. And at this point, FTWin is just like putting salt in the wound at this point. So he armors the moment he gets it. They are pushing up with it, which is good.
two down. Biscuit had moved all the way over there and was just able to shoot.
And then Ant uses armor again.
Ant is gonna jump back here, not even.
So it seems like the biggest problem the Starburst had was not trying to coordinate their specials, and quite a few panic uses of them. Double armoring when you already have armor or you're not even in a fight is questionable, and it seems as if that was definitely not called for. I don't think Bran or anyone else called for that second armor when he was off by himself like that. Positioning from ice to use his bomb rush was very risky. Granted, like I said, it's hard to tell from the POV sometimes if he started somewhere else and then dropped down there because he knew it was safe, or if Jared was there to protect him that whole time. But that sort of positioning being right there at zone, especially as a charger using a bomb rush, that's pretty sketchy.
Star, I don't know, and they were ready to punish Star you.
There wasn't that,
but that situation.
Okay, so track zones.
Then suddenly Biscuit just walks in. 2 minutes 15 came from. But I
right here. We actually know that if you saw the numbers,
Okay.
One splat and assist.
So we have L3D, Firefin, CDS Junior versus CDS, Kensa Rapid Junior, and Custom Nautilus again. So now we have an Inkjet, Bomb Rush, Storm, and Armor versus Storm, Baller, Armor, Inkjet. This is definitely an interesting spread of specials they've got on both sides. The Baller, Baller is actually kind of good because the zone in this one is like deceptively small, and it even takes a deceptively small amount to contest this point. And then the Rapid is also very capable of playing certain angles here, and once they have zone, the Rapid from zone can contest both the little lips here and just poke out people and doesn't have to do anything, and they can be safe enough in the zone, and then the moment they start to come under fire, they can back up so their death doesn't actually paint it. The L3D is an interesting one because, at least in my experience, the biggest problem that the nozzle noses suffer from is with the way that their shots work, is that angling up and angling down, like any sort of vertical change, makes it a little bit difficult to aim properly and to actually land all the shots because you're having to constantly move up and down with your reticle. And so, at least in my experience, most nozzle nose players don't favor maps that have a lot of vertical changes like this, because it can be a little bit more difficult to aim that way. But other than that, the Ink Storm's always been a classic. You stand right about here on the map and you throw your Ink Storm so it can just paint through zone. Both sides can do that. It's not really like a super good strategy, but it's like a super old one. That was like stuff done at like launch. That was a true classic, if you will. The teams can just do that and initiate with that. But so special-wise, they're essentially the same. The only difference is FTWin is using a baller for zone paint over a bomb rush. In this situation, I would definitely say that this probably hinges once again on very much on the first fight. And granted, while zones is very much always the first fight situation that a lot of these things come down to, the biggest problem is that Starburst relies on a scoped charger as their backline and their anchor. And because of a scope, you have to be more anchored than if you were unscoped. So if they don't have first control, then it's a lot harder for a charger to get any angle on here, especially when they have a rapid. Like, the charger normally wants to sit on one of these lips to try and shoot at zone or past or anything of that sort. With the rapid just existing here, they can just free poke onto these two spots, making it to where the charger has to come like down. Has to come like down here to actually do anything and try to take shots from these angles, which then the rapid can just come forward and start poking more. It's definitely going to be a trickier situation to play a charger into this fight. And then if they do have the first fight, it's still questionable, as most chargers don't really take more aggressive angles past that point, though Ice probably could and does have spots that he can go more aggressive. But even still, with control, most chargers still sit at these two spots, or will come to fence here and sit in these spots and just try to pick from the enemy lips. So I would definitely say that's once again a situation where if Starburst gets the first fight and gets the first cap, they're probably in a bit of better situation because they can provide support for ice. If they don't have the first cap, then with the Rapid and the Nautilus both being able to free poke and check spots that the Charger would want to hang in, it's a lot harder for them to come in and would basically have to rely on pushing with the Bomb Rush. But both teams have opted out of the double armor for this. So I definitely think comp-wise is probably, I would say it's an FTWin's side. Special-wise, it's probably the only real difference is the Baller versus Bomb Rush, but the zone here is so deceptively small and it's so deceptively easy to make it neutral that I think the Baller is still a good alternative to using the Bomb Rush in this situation. So I would still think special-wise, FTWin probably still has it.
And this is a map where he might be able to do that.
Yo, putting himself in pain once again. He's on the K Rapid for the second time this tournament.
So Ice is taking the spot on the lip, like I had said. We have Bursty that's just farming for the first armor. So Ant uses their armor, and they get to push up with it. Now Ice is doing exactly what I said he probably does. He has more aggressive angles. He might just still hang around fence here, but it seems as if Starburst actually played a little bit slower after Bursty's first armor. It seems as if Starburst actually played slow. Other than like getting to the zone, it seems like they fell back a bit and then armored and then started throwing bombs to advance up on them. So their late armor, like they got the first cap, which pressurizes the enemy team to take more positioning towards zone or to back up and give space. And then they armored first, which meant that Starburst had a longer lasting armor and got to go in more aggressive after that.
The game had been going on for 15 seconds and he had already doubled it. So we said he was going to have to come big and then he'd have the opportunity to. And look at this. From this position, he's going to be able to influence
so
where FTWin goes. Brought 2 people over to Brand. Brand took 2 out there. They have Jared where they want, and now this is where they can get a little creative. And some of the early
So I see this is exactly what I was talking about, of Ice being able to just stand these spots and watch both these lips. And then Starburst using both their specials in a reaction to Biscuit's Inkjet. They're definitely doing a lot better job at coordinating their specials. I don't think the Bomb Rush was necessary because Inkjet, while Inkjet can paint the zone, it's very easy to paint over an Inkjet. So I don't think the Bomb Rush was necessarily something that should have been invested in that situation.
An amazing play from him, walking up and being the real hero for his team. Yeah, they lose the zone, but now they're back in control.
And I don't know what exactly the point of that armor. Nobody on FTWin was even aggressing. So the use of that armor was probably, it was certainly odd, unless Jared called for it so he could push up more aggressively. It definitely doesn't seem like that was intended, or maybe was done to hopefully get them to play more aggressive.
This is what they do, and when it works, it's so beautiful to watch. You can see they're maybe getting caught
But
a little bit.
FTWin just plays slow in the face of the early ink armor, and then just gets armor themselves and starts playing aggressive with it.
What is your set play? Like we don't
Especially if teams have a single armor, you really have to use that to play aggressive, and if you aren't going to play aggressive with it, then you definitely need to try and play defense. Like, if you aren't going to be aggressive with your ink armor, then you have to, like, decide if, like, okay, we need to use this purely to counter theirs or a big special. And nothing was happening on FTWin's side, so that ink armor came super early and did nothing. And now this is a situation where Starburst has to try and get in. They have a big enough lead to where they don't have to force themselves to play fast. They can approach this a little bit slower. And they're ink armoring the... Oh, they've armored to the Inkjet. And Biscuit is goated, survived an Inkjet shot to the face somehow. Still ends up dying for it. But even then, they still don't have any way of actually aggressing in because Shaq is waiting for whoever would jump down on the left side. Jared's watching the right lip. Now it's basically at a situation where they have to run. they definitely they had enough time to play it slow. They didn't have to try and rush the point. They could have waited for all 4 of their specials and then moved in. I was a little unlucky with that inkjet shot, not killing Biscuit somehow. But yeah, it's definitely, I think they showed Starburst showed a really good start there, whether or not it was coincidental or was something that was planned. FTWin certainly made a questionable decision at the start to invest. Like, granted, yeah, invest armor immediately once you have it, especially at the start of zones, so you can be more aggressive. But they actually would armor, and then at the beginning, they didn't actually do a whole lot with it. They still stayed on their side of the map, which then allowed Starburst to get their armor and start pushing up with it. The moment Starburst used their armor, that's when they got super aggressive in FTWin's face, which is what they were supposed to be doing, and that's what they did. And then Ice taking more aggressive angles to watch the lips, like exactly what I thought it was going to be. They were definitely playing it well. It is simply down to the fact that the actual first real fight they lost, they couldn't recover from, and it's a little bit tricky. I said it again, I'll say it another time. It's a little tricky to see some of the stuff from these angles, but it definitely reeked of a feel of like severity, and they feel like they had to get in, or they felt like if they waited too long to get all their specials, that they were going to lose the lead, which is a huge mistake that a lot of teams make. You don't have to rush the point. You don't have to, like, it's okay to lose the lead. Granted, their lead was to 8, so it's still, there's a small gap there, but it's okay to lose the lead if it means you can win the fight. Okay, so now we have the NZAP, Firefin, Splash, Junior versus Splattershot, Tri, NZAP, and the Nautilus. For this map, and that's even the vanilla Splash, so that's an inkjet. So their comp is certainly interesting. I can see why there's the inkjet, because once the tower gets into the trenches, you can use an inkjet to get up to here and start to pressure, or you can do the classic pillow jump with the inkjet to get up to this spot right here and have an even higher angle. Both teams have an inkjet. One team, FTWin, has a missile which can be used to clear the tower, and then both teams once again favoring the double armor, and then having the bomb rush once again. The bomb rush doesn't really do a whole lot in tower control. They could use it as a way to deter the tower. If it's like comes down to overtime, they can bomb rush it to deter it. Very much how you would use the missiles to deter tower pushes. The problem with that is it's a lot harder to get the bomb rush than it is for the splash shot to get missiles. This kind of splash shot can just farm these real easy. Their comp is definitely super aggro. They have 3 weapons that can just play aggressive, and probably all 3 of them will. Where, as opposed to this, they have 2 weapons that can play aggressive, with the sorry, the NZAP and the Splash, and then the Junior that has to play back and play a little bit more safe. So I think, in this situation, I think that FTWin just outright has a better shot at this, because their comp is so much more geared towards an aggressive playstyle. All 3 of these can go super aggro and apply pressure. And when you have 2 weapons that can play aggro and 2 that have to play safe into a comp that has super aggro, and then even they have a Nautilus that can play super aggro as well. So their whole comp can just face rush into a comp of yours that has 1 that can play super aggressive, 1 that has to play safe, 1 that sort of can play aggressive, but it has to be careful about the fights it'll take now, especially when playing into armor, and then has something that has to play safe. So it's very questionable what the idea of the comp is here. I'm not exactly sure what the Splash brings here over like anything else. They could have played any other shooter. The only thing that the Splash has is this is the isn't this like Toxic Mist inkjet? So like the Toxic Mist doesn't do a whole lot. It's tower control. It's not gonna do anything. The inkjet, I can see its use, but there's better inkjet weapons to play than the splash, and better inkjet weapons with a better time to kill than the splash. But looking at the comps and the specials, I think that FTWin should just steamroll.
What's enough to FTWin here? They're going to try something new. They have Jared on the V-Splash and Bran on the Zap, giving themselves double armor and an inkjet spam.
It is, and you know, we saw Bran go with this pick earlier on their last tower control game here.
And
wow, yeah,
Jared is already down, the first one to die. They ended up Starburst ended up investing in armor when already down one. And Bran invested armor while they were still getting spawns back. Okay. I don't quite understand. Again, like, okay, what does this Toxic Mist really do? This isn't stopping Bursty. He's just, his role in this part is just to stand on the tower, so that Toxic Mist isn't going to do anything to him. And from this spot, now they can't, the Charger can't take a position to shoot the tower, because when it's in trenches, they can't fire there. And Keo playing super aggro with his armor. Ooh, nice shot by Ice. And he has to get out because he's in a really bad way. Starburst is even struggling to get their own snipe back. Now FTWin has to back up because they've lost all control of the spot that plat. And then Ice gets pushed. Ant and Bran definitely want to sit on these armors. I feel like I can't see where Bran died, but he died with armor. So he probably should have super jumped or attempted the super jump out the moment he started to go under fire. But yeah, this is basically what I expected. The FTWin's whole comp allows him to just face rush and run at you. And they have a team. They have 4 weapons that can play aggro, with one being something that can play aggro or anchor whenever they feel like it. Where Starburst has a comp that is so varied in how it can play. And then they have misplays with like armor being used while they're 2 down, or like they use an armor when they're 2 down, and then another one used armor while one person was still respawning, and then nothing happened with it. They could have tried to justify the second armor as a way to sustain and try to stay alive, but in this, like, you shouldn't use armor like that when you're down numbers, unless you definitely feel like it is a fight you can still win. Because it's a bit more of a throwaway, because double armor comps allow you to play, like, you can play a little bit more caution to the wind sort of thing, because once you have one armor go out, the second armor person can be building their armor while they have armor. But when you armor once, you lose 2 people, and then you armor again while your second armor's dead, it's questionable. You shouldn't really, in that situation, be using armor to sustain. I feel like it probably would have been best for Bran to super jump out and just try to stay alive with armor. And that way, because Ant's going to lose his special charge when he respawns, so he's going to be nowhere near it. Bran already has it, so then they have something they can use to actually start their next fight. But using it while they're down numbers is certainly an odd choice. And then I don't understand the splash. Maybe there's some reason, maybe they've been practicing it, but the kit and the weapon, I don't think the vanilla splash is really good. The splash itself isn't even really all that amazing. The Neo splash is okay. It has a burst bomb and bomb rush. But Toxic Mist is just not good. And if you're playing the weapon for the inkjet, there's much better inkjet weapons with like real subs. So I don't understand what Starburst's comp was trying to aim for in this situation. And FTWin definitely had a much better comp and was able to just roll over their weird comp.
That was
and they have to go to play on. But this does do. He's used a little bit of everything, but it really wasn't.
And so we're back on track now for Rainmaker.
It worked the last time they went on Rainmaker. Why not try it again? But that is, I think, the answer that we need to find. They really, really aren't going to get too many opportunities on this map. They need to make the ones that they do get count.
They need to make them count, and we'll have to see how they're going to get that to work. Honestly, I'm worried for them, considering how it's gone so far. But the fact that they had such a great system in place on Humpback on Splat Zones, I feel like they have a good understanding of this map and how to control it. If they can keep that system going when they're moving up onto their side of the map, moving up their plat, it could definitely work. And I could see that. I's a team-based player. I'm sure he knows what he's doing on that Stingray, which, yep, we're going to see. And combining that with Brand's Inkjet.
Okay, so now Starburst has the L3D again, a custom jet this time, a CDS, and a junior, versus a Splattershot Tri-Nouveau, interesting, and then the junior and the Nautilus. So this is one I saw with the last few that I reviewed of ICE using the custom jet in place of other Stingray weapons, and I certainly get it, especially in these sort of situations where I don't think the scoped charger was necessarily working out, especially if they don't have a comp that's around supporting it, or they have a comp that can ensure first cap or first possession of the objective. It's a lot harder to take angles down with a scoped charger, which I think that was one of the contributing factors as to why the unscoped started to get favored, along with the fact that holding a charge is actually really good, is that down and you're not in control, it's a lot harder for a scope to get angles and to take positioning because you have to play stationary, where the unscoped doesn't have to play that way and can play more aggressive and play more free than anything that has a scope. So I definitely think it's probably a call that they might have made simply because the scope isn't working out anymore. Or maybe ICE has been practicing it specifically for this map and mode combo, because he stuck to Firefin for zones. And even there, like, obviously Bomb Rush and Zone go hand in hand, so it's obvious that there was a reasoning for that. But it definitely seems as if maybe this was something either he's been practicing, or this is like, okay, the scope isn't working, let's switch this up, and maybe we'll do better after this. Other than that, their comp is still pretty good. They have, their CDS is definitely something they're playing for a more like midline, because the Storm isn't going to do anything here. They could have played the vanilla dually squelchers and had missiles, but even missiles don't do a whole lot in Rainmaker. Missiles are only really useful in zones and tower control. And then the Tri-Nouveau, so they have an Ink Storm as well, which is interesting. The missiles, again, don't really do a whole lot. But the advantage that FTWin's comp has is they have two weapons that can play super aggro and just run at you with the Tri and the Splattershot, where Starburst has essentially two midlines, an anchor, and then their backline is a custom jet. So, and then we talked about this with the other track zones, is that L3 or H3. Most people that aim with them, it's going to be a little bit trickier to aim up vertical changes because of the way that the burst fire works. So it's definitely going to be a bit trickier for the L3 player to take more aggressive fights and to actually engage on other enemies. And when you have to play a bit more slow and methodical with a weapon, when you're playing against a team that two weapons will just run at you, it's definitely going to be a tricky fight for them. This is probably well, I don't want to say the best that Starburst comp has looked, but I think even if they don't get the first fight, it is not necessarily on the fact that ICE was playing a charger anymore, or a scope charger, that the custom jet allows him to take more aggressive positioning and get more damage in than he would have with the scope. And he's just trading off the more consistent and higher damage output for being able to actually still contribute while being down. But overall, I still think that FTWin's comp is definitely superior in this situation.
The cloud just moving on that plat. I can see a really good system in place here and a really good system working. So we're going to have to see if they can take advantage of that. No Stingray from FTWin.
Yep, I mean, isn't that just such a classic?
So they armor, and now Biscuits being the one that's engaging early. That's interesting. But that goes in hand with what I talked about last game about Biscuit being able to just go aggressive when he wants. And Starburst has a good counter reaction to that, with ICE doing a good job at shutting down the push. And this makes sense for Ice to take the Rainmaker. He just uses Stingray, so he can't just sit back and use it to protect the Rainmaker holder. They're taking a bit of their time, their sweet time, to actually get up here, which allows FTWin to get some paint control and build up their specials. Oh, nice play by Jared. It was definitely a questionable one that he fell off. He probably didn't intend to, but it worked out in his favor. Now Jared is playing a bit more forward, like they should have been, to actually try and hold hold up on the plat and get some paint control. Wait, did Ant actually just armor? He armored as the last one alive. Oh no. Oh no, 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 no.
Get the flank off in the first place. FTWin, that push being stopped early. It looks like they're going to try and keep something going here, but I feel like the respawn...
They definitely know that FTWin is still just around that corner. Yeah, you can tell they're throwing splat bombs at the corner.
But look, Shaq knows how to play this game. You don't always need to go in and take the stupid fight. Let's just charge my missiles up.
Oh, Brand probably should have just tried to super jump out. That was not going to be winnable at all.
But, you know, something to a point that you said earlier, the way that FTWin defends, that is the one thing about not having a Stingray. You are so active. When you throw a couple bombs, you throw a cloud out, you get to move in, you get to decide where you're going next, whereas you don't have that option with one of the more defensive hold back type of specials. So it just all goes back to their philosophy.
I don't really know what the commentary is talking about in terms of what the subs have to do with anything about the special. I definitely do I don't think that FTWin not having a Stingray is to their detriment in this one, especially because it's with this way the map works and the vertical changes. It's definitely a lot easier to avoid a Stingray in this map than it is in some of the other maps in the game. So I don't think it's to their detriment that they don't have one.
Just before he gets armor, and they do have the missile inkjet combination. Will be interesting to see if they utilize the inkjet alongside it. Most likely, Shaq just trying to put some extra pressure with the missile.
And then we got the classic armored inkjet going forward. Ooh, unfortunate for Jared. There isn't. I don't understand the grab. Probably just to reset the Rainmaker shield to give them more time to come back in. I think Starburst is certainly playing way too slow. And I think that's a result of their comp. Their comp can't play as quick as FTWin's can, just because of how their comp has like no real front line, no real like high damage pressure weapons. It's everything that has to play at a safe spot.
You know what I love FTWin is they don't respect what the other team's doing. They just do their own thing. Earlier when Jared was flanking, they just ignored it and they walked onto the rain for Jared to get an opportunity, regardless of him dropping. Right now, they just didn't respect, Starburst, Stingray getting ready for that defense. They just walked through the Stingray, they moved forward, and they got so many points so fast and it paid out. FTWin doesn't...
They know that... They know Ice is probably playing back because he's using his Stingray just for the Rainmaker. Oh, that's unfortunate for Kyo. This is... Starburst needs to be playing aggressive. Any moment they have with their comp is a moment they need to be using to just apply pressure and just take a positioning. Because if they can't take a positioning, then their weapons that have to play at a range or play at a distance just don't have any sort of... They can't do anything. If they allow FTWin to get space back with their weapons that can play aggro against a comp that can't really, you're just making it easier for them. You have to just constantly push with every advantage you get.
All that paint they had on that side, there was an opportunity for some quick points. We are down now to the final 30 seconds.
I think that Rainmaker there was definitely bait. It looked very, very nice to grab, but
And armored, and then picked up the Rainmaker, so that's alright. Ice is now actually using his Stingray to help assist the push rather than using it before and then grabbing the Rainmaker. This camera angle is amazing. Okay, there they go. Yeah, there was definitely... Their comp did not play this map very well. And they have to be able to take any sort of advantage they get because their weapons rely so much on positioning, and they can't play as aggro as FTWin's comp could. So any sort of advantage they could get is an advantage they need to be using to get positioning, which they did not actively do. And anytime they did have the advantage, they hesitated on their pushes. It seems Jared was always trying to get someone to push here with him, and there was always someone, at least like the Rainmaker was trying to go here, but Jared and the Rainmaker can't make a push happen this way by themselves. Especially when the Rainmaker, for the vast majority of this, was ice, their only real range, and their Stingray weapon. So he was using Stingray before he picked it up, which is, I mean, good, because you're using your special before you're losing it. But definitely that last push where Ice didn't pick it up and was using a Stingray to assist the push is probably how they should have been playing it from the get-go, just to make it a bit safer to move from here. But it definitely seems as if they didn't quite take the advantages that they had. They didn't take the space that they awarded themselves, and it resulted in just allowing FTWin way too much room to just force themselves back into them, where they had nothing that could really do anything about that aggressive play back at them.
Was all up.
Discipline to defend on the defense.
Oh, bro. It's gonna be. And then when the bombs are doing the
Okay, so zones Wahoo. So we have L3D, Firefin Scope, CDS, and Junior again versus CDS, Rapid, Junior, and Nautilus. So Starburst goes back to their previous comp, so maybe it was something that I said specifically practiced for Rainmaker track. Their comp is essentially the same as their it is the same as their track Splat Zones comp, where FTWin has essentially the same as their track. So both teams have gone back to their previous comps that they've used in the last Splat Zones. In this situation, I definitely think the Inkstorms definitely work out better here because the Inkstorm actually encompasses the entirety of the zone, and while it still isn't enough to really contest it, Inkstorm has always really been a good initiator. Not so much something you would use to paint the zone itself, but has always been used as a way to initiate a push, as it helps, with the paint coverage as you're moving forward with it. The zone is actually a lot. It can be contested with a single baller, much like tracks could be, but I think that the map actually works out better for the bomb rush because how some of the walls work when they rotate around the zone, or the certain angles that you can stand in here in these two spots. So if Ice has a position like around here that he has a bomb rush and he's ready, he can throw bombs into the zone and then chuck them over the fence here to stop this push from here. And if he has a spot closer to the zone, he can also chuck them over this wall to get the people hiding here and even people here. So I think in this case, the bomb rush is probably much better than the baller, and I think, yeah, it's definitely a much better way for them to have any sort of zone presence, zone paint, and then applying the pressure would be to have the bomb rush. And then this is a trickier spot because the amount of positionings that the Charger can take if they're down is super limited, as this is like one of the only real good spots you can stand to try and get picks. But it's still really close to where any shooter can still just shoot you from below, especially when they have a rapid. So they're definitely they know that these maps, Ice needs to play from very specific angles. So they're playing a rapid so they can just poke those angles. So I would, in my opinion, I think based on the specials, I think the specials weigh a bit more in favor of Starburst just because the bomb rush works better here than the baller does. But once again, because they're playing a scope, if they don't get first control, it's a little bit trickier to play into it. But we'll see.
Here we are, everybody. Starburst on tournament point. It feels like so long ago that this started, and it already might be over. Joe gonna be going back to the K-Rabbit. That's how you know.
So they armor immediately and start going with it. Starburst is waiting to use their armor, which is interesting. Oh, they're probably waiting for the Inkjet. That's smart. Gives Jet some needed help. But they do lose Brant in the Inkjet, so it's still an even situation. So that armor by Bursty was questionable. It was only useful for saving themselves from the bomb rush, as they couldn't really move up with that. It was more of a defensive use, which when you're playing a single armor, you can't, I mean, you don't really want to use armor as defensive. You want to use that as like aggressively as possible if you're a single armor comp. They armor, but they're just sustaining with it. They didn't actually push up. They've contested the zones. They don't have to really push. They know Starburst is like struggling to try and maintain control. So in that situation, they're just using the armor to try and like scare Starburst into not really engaging against them. And so mostly just using it as a sustain, not to play super aggro. And then I forgot to mention it. This is like, FTWin's comp doesn't play super aggro. They don't have a comp that does play super aggro here, which is a stark difference to their last few, where they have something that, or at least two things that can play super aggro into it. They don't have that here. And then using the baller into a bomb rush was basically going to ensure that that baller got no value whatsoever.
They have to now account for that. That's going to be another one down. I don't think they're going to be able to get back, Matt.
No, that should be the Starburst knockout. Unless anything crazy happens and they let anyone through, it should be the Starburst knockout here. We just have to see them play this smart. Shaq's going to try and come in on the side angle. He does think
yeah, that was definitely very well played by Starburst. Taking those angles, playing a bit slow. FTWin playing a comp that is more slow-paced and doing the exact same thing that Starburst was playing the last map. They played weapons that need positioning and don't play aggro, and then didn't really have any sort of positioning. The difference with the last game was Starburst got points where they had the positioning and didn't make use of it, where in this case, FTWin just never really got that positioning. They didn't have the chance to, miss an opportunity to play at their angle, play their spots, anything like that. They just never had that. And so a Starburst comp that could play a bit more aggressive, and especially when they got the first control and had the first point, they could actually hold their positions and hold their angles and do a lot better job at holding, where FTWin just had nothing that could really play aggro into them. And when you're playing a comp that needs positioning into a comp that already has that positioning, it's definitely a struggle.
With their system,
They like the clamblitz, go jumping down once.
Only played, however, they
Those shipyard clamblitz.
I love it here, and it shows that they had to have had something, and if anything, it really speaks to Slaughterhouse Kill.
Okay, so we have a Tri, Firefin, CDS Junior versus CDS, Kensa Machine Junior, and Nautilus again. So Starburst favoring a double armor bomb rush Storm versus Storm, Splashdown, Armor, and Inkjet. I think, generally speaking, comp-wise, and well, special-wise, Starburst probably has the advantage. Double armor versus a single armor always has a favor for the double armor comp, not just because the armor is just oppressive, which it is, but it means that the armors can play a bit more flexible, and what your use of the armor can be a bit more flexible than it has been in in like a single armor comp. Where in the past, like in this whole thing, I mentioned how if you have a single armor, you try to want to go aggressive with it. You don't really want to use an armor just to sustain, because then it just doesn't get any real value. If you have a double armor comp, you can just freely switch between, like, hey, this is the armor we play aggro with, hey, this is the armor we play defensive with. Because you want to use those, like, to trade off. Like, hey, the junior armorist, we play aggro. And then while the Tri has the armor, he builds his armor from the junior's armor, and then now they have this where they can try to play aggressive again or play defensive. So double armor has an advantage over single armor just because of the flexibility you can do with both armors. And another thing that also kind of knocks FTWin's comp is a splashdown. And a splashdown is still a shoot me button. It hasn't been good in so long that most players can shut down a splashdown without a second thought. Even players that have gotten down to like 1 HP will still shoot down a splashdown because they know, like, hey, I've got nothing to lose at this point, I'll just kill you. Or try to kill you. The splashdown just doesn't really have a whole lot of value to it anymore. The only thing I can see them trying to use it for is if you jump off turn and you can splash down into plat. But that's like super situational. Like, if you're playing just to do that, then there's much better things you could be doing. You could be playing a baller weapon where you can use the baller to actually make pushes and stuff. So in general, I think Starburst definitely has a much better comp special-wise. But in terms of like the actual weapons, I definitely would still give it to Starburst. Because once, if Ice can get positioning on snipe or on turn here, like any of the spot, like if he's literally up on snipe or has a spot on turn, the only thing that can really contest him at that point is like maybe the Nautilus. Unless something like gets up onto the turn with him, he has much better positioning and much better spot than anything that FTWin's comp has. And once again, they don't have anything that's super aggro. The machine can play a bit aggressive, but because the machine is a weapon that like it has to play, you know, standing up, and it's a lot harder for it to like move around and maneuver around shots like any sort of shooter can. It's a lot easier for the charger to shoot him down. So I think overall, Starburst probably definitely has a much better comp for this.
I'm going to be going back to the K machine here. Back with a little bit more mustard here, fighting, and also we might see a couple splashdowns land if we're really lucky. Pretty much business as usual from the rest of the squad.
So the first armor, they're going to play aggressive with it. Yeah, they play sustain with it. So maybe now with the second armor, they'll use it to push aggressively. And then FTWin's actually being slow on the uptake when it comes to their armor. They're not building it. In fact, it looks like their junior isn't even really painting at this point. Yeah, and they're like the armor didn't. The splashdown resulted in nothing really. Using ink armor so they can actually get their push started, which is good. That's one of the like this map actually does a good job at encompassing like the risk reward and trying to just force points for a lead, like to further your lead, because it's so easy to be shot when you're like if you're up on the snipe to try and score, or if you drop down a plat. You like in most situations you shouldn't die for points like that, especially like you should just, if you have clans, you should just try and stay alive, especially if the fight's already been lost. I think this map does a really good job at showcasing that. Yeah, and this is definitely like Starburst is playing this super well, and their cycling of their cycling purpose of the armor is a heavy contributor to their control, where they can just freely decide what their armor is useful for. They can use armor to continue to push into their plat, or they can armor because now they're being pushed into.
Okay, I think he got out there. Only ice, dude. Only ice.
Ice, I feel like from all the interviews and all the discussions, Ice has been kind of rated.
Yeah, I don't understand. I still don't understand the splashdown. It's definitely looked like its pure use so far has just been like a panic. Oh, and then Ice is just landing shot after shot, so he's just popping off this game.
Rate him however you want. The dude is active. He is always making plays, always opening it up. And look at
Interesting. Someone must have called for Ant to back up. He could have scored from the position he was at, which would risk him dying because he might have to fall to actually land the shot.
Too smart of a player to sacrifice himself for one measly thing.
Yep, and definitely too smart to do that there. But it does look like his teammate will go down on the other side of the map right now. So playing slow, giving that jumping, getting the armor, but Jared does go down. It should be FTWin be able to move back in and trying to take the middle of the map. But hopefully the armor will try and make this more even, and it does. Biscuit going down, but not without Jared being traded. Sorry, Ice being traded.
No hate on Ant, but I definitely wish that they would spend less time just staring at the juniors POV, because we all know what the juniors doing.
They've not scored much. FTWin already almost have the lead, and that was barely any times going in. It looks like Starburst will shut down the push, but no.
Oh, and then Kyo just needs to pressure Ice.
Starts moving up on Ice. Ice forces a really bad situation and still staying in, but does get taken out eventually. And even though
This is definitely fine, regardless of the fact that their basket's open or not. FTWin is just securing their positioning. Again, it's like the winning a fight is sometimes more important than just like trying to secure a lead, because in this situation they didn't get the lead, but they secured the win of the fight, and that meant that their next push would be even easier than if they tried to force a push, wiped for it, and then now they lose all positioning for their few points.
Really well. They haven't broken that lead, and Jared moving forward, identifying where Shaq was. Shaq just shocking a bit there, getting caught out, but not without Brian getting traded in mid. So that will be Starburst getting control of mid, but not with every single player there. Should allow everyone to start moving in, especially with that pick from Biscuit. Absolutely crucial right here. Starburst again, they're still staying in the middle of the map.
You definitely it definitely shows that Ice is not as afraid, because he's just holding the super clam and just moving around with it, where most players would be trying to ditch the super clam as to not reveal their positioning. But Ice is just super confident in himself that he's just carrying it with him. He's like, yeah, you know I'm here. Like, I don't care. Starburst is certainly playing the map very well. The moment they lose any sort of control, it's not like it's out of the realm, like they aren't out. Especially because it seems like FTWin's comp doesn't play super aggro into that either. That was an example of FTWin being given the space and then doing nothing with it. They had so many, they've had moments there where like Ice was the only one alive, and I don't know if they're just like genuinely afraid of him, or like landing all his shots and wiping them or something. But the moments where they had positioning and could take map control, they weren't doing it, which allowed Starburst to just freely walk back in and regain what they had just lost like 10 seconds prior with no contest. It definitely was a misplay by FTWin to not play their spot. I still think that they could have played something that had more aggressive presence than the Kensa machine, where it definitely, I mean, both teams like kill wise didn't do a whole lot, but it was definitely a much better performance by Starburst than it was for FTWin. Alright, so for Manta Tower Control, we're looking at the Inkjet, Bomb Rush, Inkstorm, Armor versus Missile, Double Armor, and the Inkjet. So here we have FTWin favoring the Double Armor, and much like we talked about before, this allows flexibility of the usage of armor rather than just using it for aggressive play. I think the Inks, well, trying to think, because like this is a good map. Like the middle point of this map is really good for Charger. Like if a Charger has like angles over here, or up here, or anywhere out like their spot on the map, there's good angles to cover the entirety of mid and even on the snipe. But once the tower gets to like street or past here, like once it gets to this part of the map, then your list of angles starts to lower and get like lessened, unless you're like one of those crazy people that like the Charger comes up here and then gets on this box right here. From this box you can get shots like all around here, but this is like super risky because it's really easy for the enemy team to just walk over here and kill you. So I think this is definitely, Ice's job is basically at this point just to hold this mid point, because once it's past mid, he has to take super aggressive angles to actually have any sort of impact once we're here. If the tower gets down here, he can stand at this point, but even this is super risky because the enemy can just jump up from, or jump down from here to kill him. So it's certainly an interesting one that he would play a Charger here over the custom jet that he played earlier. Comp-wise, I think they have a real even split comp-wise. Their double armor definitely gives FTWin a special advantage, and they're back to their 3, maybe 4 aggro comp. So I think FTWin, this is the comp that they're showing like, hey, now we're serious. We're just gonna steamroll. We're gonna just run over you, and this is our comp that runs over you. And it definitely showed in the previous games. This is definitely in the favor of FTWin. in both specials and comp overall.
To switch back now to the NZAP here. It makes a lot of sense here, especially because it's tower control, and Bran is not going to be going back to the NZAP. So, I mean, maybe it was a tower control thing before, but it appears it's not going to be the case this time.
So FTWin gets their first armor. They're not really moving, they're not doing anything with it though, but that's fine because again they have a second armor that they can do something with. Starburst did use their armor to take a positioning on the tower and start to control mid.
Team to engage on mid will get something out of it. They find Joe in a 4v3, but it's not like they get a full fight here. FTWin could definitely find this back if they start getting the special online, but with Bistic going down, I think that will be unlikely, especially as we see those armors come online.
And Ice taking the aggressive angles, like I mentioned. If he wants to get value, he has to start playing these weird spots. FTWin armoring while several are down. Ice having to back up. His numbers are down, so he's just going to have to sit here and hold mid like we had talked about before. Now, they armored so they can use the inkjet.
Brilliant push from Starburst, but now it's FTWin's push. They pop the inkjet, they pop 2 armors and missiles. They've used
So now they've armored to continue their aggressive push into their spawn. You can see Shaq and somebody else. Keo and Shaq are already pushing towards their spawn, the enemy spawn, with that second ink armor they got. And now, while they're still aggressing, their other ink armor is coming up here in a second. And now in this situation, it's a lot harder for Starburst to actually play because they have to take these off angles. They have to basically they have to really flank because it's super hard to just push straight in the tower from that snipe point up here. They have to like flank or come out of the side. And when they have something like the Charger that can't do that and just has to stand on the mast there and shoot at the tower, it's super tricky. Was Keo actually up in their spawn there? Yeah, I think he was in their spawn. You can see him on the mast up there. super aggressive play, but it's commendable. The no fear on the guy. That's respectable. So now, while FTWin was mostly down, Starburst has to take aggressive positioning. And now they have literally every special. Ooh, their armor dies first. So now sustaining this fight's going to be a little bit trickier into a double armor comp like this. They have to back up. Ooh. They have to try and preserve the specials they have. Because right now, they don't want to try and push with their specials. They want to wait for their other players to come back and just try to use all of them together. Or to try and cycle them together. So they saved it for Armored Inkjet, which is a good play. Always a good combo. Doesn't really get any value out of it, but now FTWin loses 2, so now Starburst can actually start taking more positioning mid. Allow Ice to get more forward positioning. I feel like in this sort of situation, if there's a double armor, it would probably be in Jared's best interest, like to probably use the armor or the Storm to follow tower. Because while Storm doesn't do a ton of damage to armor, it makes it easier for little shots to follow up and break armor. So it'd be like, what I would do is I would probably throw the Storm down street with the tower, just so that any sort of aggressive push into it has to worry about that Storm damage also dealing with your armor. And then Keo just dominating.
This is what we say. This is what he said. Him being in position at the start of that was already so important. They didn't have to wait for him to get where he needed to be because he was already there, falling down. Now Shaq gonna dance on the tower to push it through here. Keo is making another loop, but Biscuit's there as well. Shaq and Ant dancing on the tower. It's just going to be Shaq now, who is going to go down here in a one.
It's definitely a very well played game by FTWin to just play super aggro and showing no respect to the other team, which is that's what this comp does really well. They are showing no respect, and their comp essentially just screams no respect. The double armor, 3 aggressors, it just screams like, hey, we don't respect you at all, we're just going to run at you. This is like, okay, so what is... I want to pause here because I don't know what is this Ingstorm accomplishing? Where is what is this supposed to be doing? There is nobody here, like on, well, Bran, but this storm doesn't assist anything. It probably would have been better to like stand here and throw the storm this way so that anyone coming up this path would take the damage from the storm, or to like wait here and throw it this way so that anyone following the tower's path would start to take damage. But what is this storm doing? There's Bran here, but there's no enemy here, so this storm is just paint in a spot that there's nobody's there, no one's going this way. The tower isn't going this way, so what is this storm supposed to be for?
They're popping the ball so early, and this is what FTWin wants. They want you to expend your resources so they can come back in with their own. And right now on tower, look at all of that damage coming in. Of course, it's going to get taken out. There's not enough of you going down, but that's going to be it.
Yep.
Rain goes down, and FTWin take it 5-2.
So definitely, that was definitely much better played by FTWin and Starburst. That map, or their comp in general, is definitely that comp. Their Splattershot, Try, and Zap Nautilus is probably their best comp because they're playing 3 aggressors, 2 armor, and then a good backline that can play aggressive or play safe. That comp has shown to just constantly roll over anything that Starburst has. And the maps that Starburst won were very convincing wins, that they were able to actually make use of their comps and the fact that their weapons need to hold positions. When they were actually able to do that, they did a very good job at it. And then when FTWin tried to play the comps similar to that, where they had to take aggressive spots or they had to hold positioning and played weapons that are like more mid to long range, FTWin sort of faltered in that ballpark. Starburst definitely need, in my opinion, they would need to work on trying to integrate something that's more front line into their comps. Or if they are going to continue to play these weapons where it's like CDS, Junior, L3, and Firefin, they need to be more like aggressive into any sort of advantage they get. If they kill one person or they kill 2 people, that is like the red flag to just start moving forward, taking any single spot you need and just trying to hold those spots. Because if you don't, then you're playing weapons that need range or need like distance. And if you aren't getting that distance or you aren't taking that distance for yourself, then weapons like the Splattershot, the Try, the NZAP, things that don't really need positioning and can just run at you, it's a lot easier for them to just run at you. So you need to take these positions, you need to take these angles, you need to take these spots on the map. And when they did it, it worked. And they did really well, and it showed that they were doing really well. When they weren't doing it, they kind of just got ran at. And FTWin's comps do a very good job at running at you. And that's just exactly what happened. The FTWin faltered in the, like I said, with the comps where they tried to play what Starburst plays. And it didn't work out for them. They're definitely more geared towards an aggressive playstyle. So playing a bit more of like position-based and range-based comps, I don't think necessarily suits them very well. I feel like they're probably much better playing this sort of comp where they have the 3 to 4 aggro players, and then they just try to face rush and show no respect. If you're playing a comp that's super aggro, you have to play like you have no respect for the enemy team, regardless if you really do or not. You basically have to be like, hey, screw you, I'm going to kill you. Run at them. And their comp does a very good job at running over a comp like Starburst. So with that, that was the grand finals. FTWin wins the whole thing. I might consider reviewing the other games, the 2 that came before this, but I wanted to look at this one specifically because it was the grand finals. And FTWin did a really good job, really well played. Starburst did a really good job as well. The wins they got were convincing. The ones that they didn't win, there were some things that could be fixed. Is definitely not like even the ones they lost. A good chunk of them were not like blowouts. There was no way you were going to win. It was mistakes that piled onto each other, things that could be fixed, and things that can be fixed mean that there's potential for wins down the road. So I definitely think that if they're going to stick to their comps, they need a little bit more work on how they're going to, take their positions and work with advantages. This is something I talked with when I was the coach for Supernova about. One of the easiest ways that you can inform your teammates of when you can take more aggressive angles or you can take space is to simply say, hey, we're 1 up, we're 1 or 2 up, we're even, anything like that. Those are simple callouts that take a second to make, but convey a lot to the team. And I feel like, and I don't know what their comms are like, so I don't know anything about it, but with the way their comp works, it would probably benefit them a lot to have someone that is constantly saying stuff like that. That way they know, like their L3 player knows they can move up a bit more because their try is down or whatever like that. Comms like those go a long way towards improving like fights, and I think that's something that it comes from other games, other like competitive games use calls like that, and I definitely brought that from them. But when I was coaching Supernova, that definitely improved their more aggressive moves when they had someone that was just calling like, hey, we're up 2, let's go. We're down 2, back up. We're up 1, we're even, we can still take fights. Comms like that do go a long way. But basically, what I'm trying to say, and I'm very long-winded about all of this, Starburst did very well. FTWin did super well. Both teams still have stuff to work on. FTWin faltered in trying to sort of mirror match Starburst. Starburst faltered in making small mistakes into their comp that stacked on to becoming a bigger mistake. But definitely improvement can be made. So with that, I think that'll be it for me. That was quite a bit of crazy rambling from myself. So this video I'll be putting this up on YouTube probably tomorrow. It was a pretty long one. This set was really good. I would like to in the future try to do this live with the stream. I originally made a comment about doing analyst desks for tournaments a bit ago, and that's when I was contacted about this Tassel doing an analyst desk, which they ended up doing. I was contacted about it and talked to somebody about it, and I thought, because I showed interest in it and said that I would be willing to do it, and I've been doing this, that I'd be invited to do it. Well, I wasn't. So I would like to maybe one day do that, or have like some tournament. It doesn't even have to be like Tassel or anything like that. I think that the idea of having analysts sort of provide input between sets is much better than just having an image on the screen with a countdown, like saying like we'll be back. I definitely think that's a good idea that tournaments should maybe try to do. Maybe not all of them. Maybe like bigger tournaments, majors, stuff like that could probably do it. But yeah, so with that, I think that's it for me. So I want to thank everyone for watching, and I will see you all later.